What if one day you walked into the store and your favorite foods were just gone? Not sold out, not delayed, just vanished. Everywhere. We're not talking about some distant sci-fi scenario. The next global food collapse is already brewing. It's not just about empty wallets. It's about empty shelves. Climate disasters, trade disruptions, political instability, and failing crops are creating a perfect storm. And while most people are watching food prices rise, they're missing the bigger threat. Some foods are on the verge of disappearing completely. In this video, we're exposing 11 everyday foods that could vanish first. Not years from now, but soon. From breakfast staples to pantry must-haves, these items are already in trouble, and the signs are everywhere if you know where to look. This isn't fear-mongering, it's what the data is screaming and what most media won't tell you. So if you want to stay ahead of the next food shockwave and know what to stock up on before it's too late, stick around. Because once these 11 foods are gone, it could be a long time before you ever see them again. 1. Cocoa, chocolate's disappearing act. Chocolate lovers, brace yourselves. The treat we all adore is heading toward a global meltdown. Cocoa, the heart of chocolate, is teetering on the edge of a full-blown crisis, and most people don't even realize it yet. Here's the kicker. Over 70% of the world's cocoa beans come from just two countries, Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. That kind of dependency is risky, and in 2024, the cracks began to show. Unpredictable weather hammered both nations, first with scorching droughts, then with heavy rains that unleashed black pod rot, a fast-spreading fungal disease that destroyed huge portions of the harvest. As if that wasn't enough, a silent killer is sweeping across cocoa farms. CSSV virus. There's no cure. Once a tree is infected, it has to be cut down and replaced. But new trees take 4 to 5 years to bear fruit, and most small farmers can't afford to wait that long without income. On top of that, many of the cocoa trees in West Africa are simply old. Over 30 years in age, they now yield far less than they used to. Yet replanting efforts are stalling. Why? Because struggling farmers are being forced to choose between short-term survival and long-term sustainability. Experts predict two major shocks coming, one around 2026 as disease and drought collide, and another by 2030 as aging trees collapse the supply chain. Chocolate may not vanish entirely, but it's rapidly becoming a luxury, scarce, expensive, and out of reach for the average shopper. Lab-grown cocoa is in the works, but let's be real. It's not replacing the real thing anytime soon. 2. Honey. Nature's gold is slipping away. Honey might seem like a simple sweetener, but it's actually a warning sign, and that warning just turned red. Behind every golden jar lies a complex web of pollinators, farmers, and fragile ecosystems. And right now, that web is unraveling fast. In just the past year, U.S. commercial beekeepers have reported something almost unthinkable. Over 60% of their hives lost. Not just a bad season, a mass die-off. These aren't backyard beekeepers. We're talking about professional operations, responsible for pollinating massive crops, from California almonds to Washington apples. Without them, those crops don't survive. Globally, the numbers look deceptively stable. Yes, managed hive counts in places like Asia and Africa are rising, but that growth hides a more dangerous truth. Wild pollinators are vanishing. Bees, butterflies, even pollinating beetles, wiped out by a toxic combo of pesticides, climate stress, and habitat loss. In regions where wild pollinators do most of the heavy lifting, that's a looming disaster. And the ripple effect is brutal. Around 3/4 of all fruit, nut, and seed crops depend on pollinators. Without enough bees, we're not just losing honey, we're threatening entire food systems. Almonds, apples, avocados, all are already seeing lower yields due to poor pollination. As bee populations collapse, so does honey production. Prices are climbing and purity is under threat. Fake or watered-down honey is flooding shelves, especially as real supplies shrink. Unless there's a miracle, like breakthrough drone pollinators, or a worldwide shift to bee-safe farming, honey could soon join the list of everyday foods that become rare, expensive, and possibly out of reach. It's not just a sweet treat anymore, it's an endangered one. 3. Avocados. The green gold turning to dust. Avocados, the creamy, nutrient-packed superfruit that's taken over breakfast menus, smoothie bowls, and social media, could soon become nothing more than a luxury item. Right now, Mexico grows the lion's share of the world's avocados, with the state of Michoacán alone responsible for the bulk of global exports. But this region is facing a hidden emergency. Growing just one avocado takes over 300 liters of water. And the more orchards expand, the more they're draining rivers, depleting aquifers, and triggering environmental backlash. Locals are now pushing back. Water conflicts are erupting across farming regions. In some places, officials have started issuing ecological bans on planting new orchards to protect remaining water and wildlife. That means no new supply, just increasing demand from countries hooked on avocado toast. But it's not just Mexico in trouble. Peru and Chile, major players in the global avocado trade, are getting slammed by climate extremes. El Niño weather patterns are bringing longer, harsher droughts to the Andes, crushing harvests. In previous El Niño years, yields dropped by nearly 40%, and forecasts suggest things could get worse between 2026 and 2029. Put it all together, water wars in Mexico, climate chaos in South America, and skyrocketing global demand, and you get what analysts are calling a perfect storm for a supply collapse. If that happens, expect prices to soar and avocados to disappear from everyday kitchens. Restaurants may start subbing in cheaper spreads, and what was once a daily staple might soon be reserved for the rich. Avocados aren't just trending, they're teetering. 4. Rice, the silent collapse of the world's one staple. Rice isn't just a food, it's survival for more than half the world's population. But right now, the most dependable grain on Earth is inching toward a full-blown crisis, quietly, globally. At the center of the storm is India, the largest rice exporter on the planet. In 2024, the Indian government imposed a minimum export price of $490, 0 cents per metric ton. Not to boost profits, but to protect its own people from food inflation and shrinking supplies. It was a domestic safeguard, but globally, it sent shockwaves. Lower impact nations that depended on affordable Indian rice were suddenly priced out, leaving millions vulnerable. But supply chain politics are only half the problem. The other half? Climate change is attacking rice at its roots. In Vietnam's Mekong Delta, one of the world's most fertile rice regions, rising sea levels are pushing salty ocean water deep into the farmland. This saltwater invasion is contaminating irrigation systems, crippling yields, and threatening up to 30% of the region's harvest. This isn't just a bad season, it's a pattern that's worsening every year. By 2028, experts warn we could hit a dangerous threshold when global rice reserves dip below the critical 3-month buffer. That's the point where panic sets in. All it takes is two major exporters like India and Vietnam experiencing crop failures at the same time, and the entire global market could go into a tailspin. Expect price spikes, hoarding, export bans, and in some regions, outright shortages. Rice has always been the quiet foundation of global food security, but when it cracks, everything above it shakes. 5. Corn, the quiet collapse of a global giant. Corn might seem too big to fail. It's in everything from your cereal to your gas tank. But don't be fooled. Even this agricultural powerhouse is showing serious cracks, and if current trends continue, corn could be one of the next major crops to tumble in the global food collapse. Yes, the U.S. reported record yields per acre in 2024 thanks to better technology and smarter farming methods. But here's the twist. Overall production still dropped. Why? Because the Midwest, America's Corn Belt, was getting scorched. By the end of 2024, over half the region was locked in drought, slashing harvests and leaving fields dry and brittle. Enter short corn, a new genetically engineered variety designed to resist wind and heat. These stubby stalks can be packed more densely, use water more efficiently, and even allow drones to spray fertilizer with pinpoint accuracy. Sounds like the perfect solution, right? Not so fast. These hybrids are still in trial stages and come with a hefty price tag. Meanwhile, the cost of growing traditional corn is rising fast. Between February and March 2025 alone, nitrogen fertilizer prices, specifically UN-32, jumped another 5%, squeezing farmers even harder. And here's the bigger problem. Corn isn't just food, it's fuel, feed, and a key ingredient in thousands of products. Demand is exploding globally, especially for biofuels and industrial uses. But if farmers can't afford the inputs, or the weather keeps working against them, The supply simply won't keep up. And by 2030, experts warn we could hit a breaking point. If solutions like short corn don't scale fast, corn could become scarce and shockingly expensive. For a crop that underpins modern food systems, that's a dangerous game to play. 6. Coffee. Your morning ritual is on the brink. For millions, coffee isn't just a drink, it's a ritual, a comfort, even a lifeline. But behind every cup lies a crisis that's quietly brewing into disaster. Over 1/3 of the world's coffee comes from a single country, Brazil. And that's where the alarm bells are ringing loudest. In 2025, Brazil confirmed a severely low-yield year for Arabica beans, the smooth, rich variety preferred by most drinkers. Why? Blame a toxic mix of drought, unpredictable rain, and heat-driven crop stress. The result? Smaller beans, lower quality, and skyrocketing processing costs. But the damage doesn't stop there. Vietnam and India, two other coffee giants, are battling a double threat: the coffee borer beetle and leaf rust disease. In India's coffee belt, farmers have taken drastic action, burning entire plantations to contain infections. The pests are thriving in the hot, humid conditions worsened by El Niño, and forecasts show those patterns intensifying through 2027. Solutions exist, sort of. Some startups are creating beanless coffee through fermentation, but these are boutique products, nowhere near mass production. Research labs are working on disease-resistant hybrids, but they won't hit full commercial farms until 2029 or later. That leaves a dangerous gap. Experts warn that between 2027 and 2028, we could hit what they call a coffee extinction window. Not total disappearance, but a dramatic shift. Your daily cup might still exist, but expect it to cost 2 to 3 times more, especially for real Arabica beans. Unless major investments are made in climate resilience, pest control, and expanding into new growing regions, coffee as we know it is heading toward luxury status, turning a daily comfort into a rare treat. And 79. 7 bananas, the global favorite on the brink of extinction. Bananas are everywhere, in breakfast bowls, smoothies, kids' lunches, and yet they're quietly heading toward collapse. The culprit? A silent killer spreading through the world's most vulnerable crop. The banana most of us eat, the Cavendish, dominates nearly half of global banana exports, but there's a catch. It's a genetic clone. Every single Cavendish banana is virtually identical, making the entire species defenseless against a single threat. And that threat has a name: tropical race 4, or TR4, a ruthless fungal disease that invades the soil and chokes the plant from the inside. What makes TR4 especially terrifying is that it doesn't just kill the plant, it poisons the land. Once TR4 hits, the soil becomes unusable for Cavendish bananas for decades, and is spreading. After tearing through farms in Southeast Asia, it reached Colombia and Peru, key suppliers for the US and Europe. Scientists call Latin America the final domino, and it's already starting to fall. Efforts are underway to breed resistant varieties like Musa 608, but that's years from hitting the market. And even then, replacing millions of acres of Cavendish trees isn't something that can happen overnight. This isn't just about losing a snack. In countries like Uganda and the DRC, bananas are a daily food source, not a treat. A full-scale collapse could devastate diets and economies across the tropics. With containment failing and resistant strains still on the horizon, the countdown has begun. If nothing changes fast, bananas could go from a grocery staple to a rare and expensive delicacy. Or worse, disappear entirely from your plate. 8. Soy, the fragile crop holding the world together. Soybeans might not grab headlines like wheat or rice, but don't let that fool you. They're one of the most critical crops on the planet. From tofu and soy milk to livestock feed, cooking oil, and even biodiesel, soy is everywhere. It's in your pantry, your fridge, your fuel tank, and right now it's on very shaky ground. The heart of global soybean production beats in Brazil, and that heart is under stress. In recent seasons, nearly 60% of Brazil's soybean farms have been hammered by drought, a trend made worse by the strengthening El Niño cycle. During major El Niño years, Brazil's yields have dropped as much as 74% in the worst-hit zones, and with the 5-20-26 cycle predicted to be especially severe, experts are already bracing for another 15% or more drop in output, even under conservative estimates. That would be bad enough on its own. But now the U.S. Midwest, the second largest soybean producer, is facing its own battles. Erratic rainfall, persistent droughts, and fertilizer costs that keep climbing. If both agricultural giants take a hit at the same time, a real risk in the 2026-2027 window. The global soy market could unravel fast. And it's not just the weather. Skyrocketing fuel prices, fertilizer shortages, and rising shipping costs are making it harder and more expensive to grow and move soybeans around the world. For developing countries relying on soy for food, or wealthy nations using it to feed livestock, this could spark a global protein crisis. Soy isn't just a crop anymore, it's a lifeline. And it's starting to fray. 9. Olive oil, from kitchen staple to liquid gold. Olive oil has long been the crown jewel of Mediterranean kitchens. A healthy fat, a flavor booster, and a global export worth billions. But that golden bottle in your pantry? It's now at serious risk of vanishing. The crisis starts in Spain, which produces over 40% of the world's olive oil. For the last few years, Spain has been gripped by a historic drought, the worst in 70 years, according to European climate monitors. Without water, olive trees suffer. Yields have dropped by 30% or more, and even the olives that do grow are smaller and less oily. Farmers now need more fruit just to produce the same amount of oil, driving costs through the roof. But water isn't the only problem. In Italy's Puglia region, a deadly bacterial disease, Xylella fastidiosa, is wiping out ancient olive groves. Once infected, trees slowly dry out and die. And the worst part? There's no cure. The disease has already killed hundreds of thousands of trees and is now threatening to spread to Spain and Greece, the other giants of olive oil production. Experimental trees like Fabulosa might offer hope, but they won't be producing oil at scale for years. In the meantime, prices are skyrocketing, especially for extra virgin olive oil, with shortages already reported in parts of Europe. Many retailers have started rationing bottles, and in countries like the U.S., customers are switching to cheaper blends, or alternative oils like sunflower or soybean. Bottom line? Without immediate climate solutions and aggressive disease control, olive oil could shift from an everyday essential to an unaffordable luxury, or worse, disappear from your shelf entirely. 10. Wheat. The backbone of global diets is starting to crack. Wheat might seem like a guaranteed part of every meal. Bread, pasta, cereal. But the world's most widely consumed grain is under serious threat. And if current trends continue, wheat could be one of the first major staples to disappear from tables during the next food collapse. Let's start in Europe, one of the world's wheat powerhouses. After years of erratic weather, 2024 delivered a brutal blow, the lowest wheat harvest in over a decade. Drought and extreme heat tore through major producers like France, Germany, and Poland, forcing mills and exporters into crisis mode as supply chains tightened. But the real pressure cooker is China, the world's largest wheat consumer. Spring 2025 brought devastating droughts and unrelenting heat waves to key farming regions. Some provinces have already reported crop losses of up to 50%, compounding the strain from years of previous poor harvests. Now layer on geopolitics. The EU has reimposed grain import limits on Ukraine, cutting off affordable wheat flows to buyers in the Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia. These countries, heavily reliant on imports, are now scrambling for alternatives and finding none. All of this is driving wheat prices to heights not seen since the 2008 food crisis. But here's the scarier part. Strategic wheat reserves, the emergency stockpiles many nations depend on, are being drained at record speeds. If just one or two more bad seasons hit both Europe and Asia, global wheat supplies could fall below the 90-day security threshold. This isn't just about expensive bread. It's about school meals, food aid, and national stability. For wheat-dependent regions, the warning is clear. Shortages are no longer a possibility. They're becoming a probability. 11. Wild salmon, the collapse of a cold water icon. Wild salmon, once a symbol of abundance along the North American West Coast, is now slipping into crisis mode, and fast. By 2025, California had already canceled its commercial salmon season for the second year in a row, citing dangerously low Chinook salmon numbers. But this isn't just a seasonal hiccup, it's a long-term unraveling. Three major threats are crushing wild salmon populations: warming rivers, parasites from fish farms, and decades of habitat destruction. Rivers that were once cool, clean, and teeming with life are now heating up, throwing salmon off their migratory rhythm. Warmer waters lower oxygen levels and increase mortality, especially during the critical spawning season. Even brief temperature spikes have been linked to mass die-offs according to recent studies. Meanwhile, open net salmon farms along the Pacific coast are spreading parasites like sea lice, which cling to juvenile wild salmon as they migrate out to sea. These tiny invaders are deadly, especially when combined with declining food availability due to shifting ocean currents. Then there's the habitat issue. Dams, irrigation systems, and sediment buildup have choked off salmon spawning grounds in places like the Columbia River Basin. What used to be one of the richest salmon runs in the world is now being described by scientists as a restoration project that could take decades. If current conditions continue, California's prized Chinook may vanish regionally by 2027, and sockeye populations in the Pacific Northwest could drop below recovery thresholds by 2030. This isn't just the loss of a food. It's the collapse of an entire ecological network. From bears to forests, wild salmon feed more than just humans. And once they're gone, the ripple effect will be felt across both ecosystems and dinner table. The warning signs aren't just coming, they're already here. From the slow disappearance of honey and wild salmon to the unraveling of crops like cocoa, wheat, and rice, we're staring down a food future that looks far more fragile than anyone imagined. These 11 foods aren't rare delicacies. They're everyday essentials. And yet, climate extremes, soil degradation, disease outbreaks, and political bottlenecks are pushing them closer and closer to the edge. This isn't about fear. It's about foresight. The shelves won't empty overnight, but they will thin out, prices will climb, and some items will simply become unavailable, not just for weeks, but for years. If you're waiting for the headlines to scream collapse before you act, you'll already be too late. Now's the time to take stock, learn where your food comes from, diversify your pantry, support sustainable practices, and above all, stay informed. Because knowledge is your first line of defense when the systems we rely on begin to shake. The next food crisis won't just affect what we eat, it will reshape how we live. Don't wait until your favorite foods are gone. Prepare now, while you still have the chance.